Awareness is the first step, and it is more profound than most people realize. Too often, we live our lives on autopilot, running on routines, habits, and unexamined thoughts. Negative thinking seeps in quietly, like a shadow at dusk, and before we even notice, it has taken root in our minds. We become so accustomed to these patterns that we mistake them for truth. The first act of courage is simply noticing when your thoughts are working against you. This is not a one-time realization. It is a daily practice, a commitment to being awake and present with your own mind. To be aware is to question the voice inside your head that so frequently whispers doubt, fear, or insecurity. That voice is not an authority. It is a reflection of past experiences, learned fears, and societal expectations that have nothing to do with your present potential. By observing it rather than accepting it automatically, you create the space to discern which thoughts are constructive and which are destructive. Awareness allows you to step outside of your internal narrative and see it for what it truly is, a story, not reality. Awareness is also deeply connected to clarity. When you recognize negative thinking, you begin to notice patterns. You see the triggers, the circumstances, the moments when doubt is most likely to surface. You understand that certain conversations, certain comparisons, or certain environments can amplify negativity. This understanding is not meant to make you fearful. Rather, it empowers you to take responsibility for what enters your mind and what you allow to stay. Clarity comes from consistent observation. When you practice awareness, you begin to notice subtle signs of negativity, small, almost imperceptible thoughts that accumulate over time. A fleeting sense of self, doubt in the morning, a tiny voice telling you you're not capable during a meeting, a whisper of insecurity when you compare yourself to others. All of these moments are signals. They are your mind trying to communicate with you, to reveal hidden fears that have been shaping your behavior. Awareness is listening to those signals without immediately reacting. Awareness also brings a sense of liberation. Once you can observe your negative thinking objectively, you no longer have to be enslaved by it. You begin to understand that thoughts are not commands, they are suggestions. The moment you separate yourself from the constant stream of judgment, critique, and fear, you create a new level of freedom. You can choose how to respond instead of being pulled by instinctive reaction. This is the foundation of true mental strength. Awareness is not just noticing the negative, it is noticing everything with equal attention. When you practice this consistently, you also start to observe moments of positivity, moments of clarity, moments of possibility. Awareness trains you to see reality as it is, rather than through a distorted lens of fear and doubt. It teaches patience because you begin to understand that change does not happen overnight, and that the mind requires repeated gentle redirection. Being aware also develops resilience. The more you practice recognizing negative thinking as it arises, the less power it has over your emotions and decisions. You begin to see that a thought is just a thought, and it doesn't define your identity or dictate your outcomes. Awareness is the anchor that prevents the storm of negativity from sweeping you away. It allows you to pause before reacting, to step back before taking unnecessary risks fueled by fear, and to make deliberate choices that serve your long-term goals rather than your immediate anxieties. Awareness demands honesty. It requires that you face parts of yourself you might prefer to ignore, the doubts, insecurities, and biases that live quietly beneath the surface. This is not comfortable work. It is uncomfortable, often painful, and yet profoundly necessary. Without this honesty, negative thinking continues unchallenged, silently guiding your decisions and limiting your potential. Awareness is a mirror held up to your mind, reflecting both your strengths and your blind spots. Through awareness, you develop a vocabulary for your internal experience. You begin to articulate what you are feeling, thinking, and believing. This articulation is critical because unspoken thoughts have power over you precisely because they remain unexamined. Naming your negative thoughts gives them structure and boundaries. They are no longer amorphous shadows in your mind. Awareness allows you to categorize, question, and ultimately take control over them, giving you a framework for transformation. Finally, awareness is the gateway to intentional living. Every choice you make, every action you take, can be informed by conscious observation rather than reactive thought. You begin to live in a state of presence, where your mind is not a battleground but a laboratory for discovery. Awareness cultivates curiosity about your own internal world and teaches you that change begins not with external circumstances, but with understanding and noticing the workings of your own mind. Every thought you hold carries weight, whether you realize it or not. The mind is not a passive observer of life. It actively interprets and constructs reality based on the beliefs it nurtures. When you think in patterns of limitation, fear, or self-doubt, your perception of the world bends to match those patterns. Your thoughts act as a lens, coloring every experience with the hues of your inner narrative. To underestimate the influence of your own thinking is to underestimate the very power that shapes your existence. Thoughts are not just fleeting ideas. They are the architects of your actions. What you believe you can or cannot do influences the risks you take, the opportunities you pursue, and the persistence you bring to challenges. If your thoughts tell you that failure is inevitable, you may never even try. If your mind whispers that success is reserved for others, you unconsciously create distance between yourself and what is possible. Reality begins in the mind, and every accomplishment, every breakthrough, starts as a single idea. Beliefs born in your mind are contagious to your emotions. They generate feelings that either propel you forward or hold you back. A positive thought fosters hope, confidence, and motivation, creating an emotional environment conducive to growth. A negative thought breeds fear, anxiety, and hesitation, building invisible walls around potential. The cycle is constant. Thought shapes emotion, emotion shapes action, and action shapes results. To ignore this is to ignore the engine driving your life. When you recognize that your thoughts shape your reality, you gain the ability to choose them more deliberately. You understand that external circumstances are often neutral until interpreted by your mind. Two people can experience the same situation and respond in completely different ways based solely on the thoughts they bring to it. One sees opportunity where another sees obstacle. One sees lessons where another sees failure. Your mind is the translator of experience, and the words it speaks are the script for your life. Every habit of thought reinforces itself over time. Repeatedly entertaining certain ideas strengthens the neural pathways associated with them, making them easier to access and harder to break. Negative thinking becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because the brain begins to anticipate and confirm the patterns it has rehearsed. But the same is true for positive thinking. Intentional, constructive thoughts reshape your mental pathways, opening doors that once seemed permanently closed. The mind is malleable, and it responds to the stories you allow it to tell. Thoughts also shape perception of others and the world at large. If your mind is dominated by suspicion, mistrust, or cynicism, you interpret the actions of others through a filter of negativity. If your thoughts are rooted in empathy, curiosity, and optimism, you see opportunities for connection, collaboration, and learning. The world does not change its nature, but your experience of it changes entirely depending on the inner narrative you carry. Understanding the power of thought requires recognizing the subtle ways it manifests in behavior. It is present in the way you speak, the choices you make, the risks you avoid, and the goals you set or fail to set. Your thoughts guide your habits, and your habits guide your destiny. Awareness of this influence is critical because it means you are never entirely at the mercy of circumstance. You are a co-creator of your own life. Shifting your thoughts is not a matter of forcing positivity, but of conscious alignment with possibility. You begin by questioning beliefs that limit you, identifying assumptions that no longer serve you, and intentionally entertaining ideas that open doors rather than close them. Your thoughts become tools, not tyrants, and with repeated practice, the world you experience begins to reflect the clarity and courage of your inner mind. The way you think about setbacks and challenges directly affects your ability to overcome them. A thought that frames failure as permanent and personal restricts your ability to learn and adapt. A thought that frames it as temporary and instructive creates resilience and growth. Your reality is shaped not by what happens to you, but by how your mind interprets what happens. Every perspective you choose carries consequences that ripple outward into every aspect of your life. Finally, embracing the power of thought is an invitation to take responsibility for your inner world. To understand that what occupies your mind is not just personal, but profoundly influential on your trajectory, is to step into authority over your own life. The thoughts you nurture today will manifest as the reality you experience tomorrow. By cultivating ideas that are courageous, expansive, and intentional, you begin to mold a life that reflects not circumstance, but conscious creation. Challenging negativity begins with recognizing that not every thought deserves your attention. The mind constantly generates ideas, many of which are automatic and unconscious. Some of these thoughts are helpful, guiding you toward solutions and awareness, while others are destructive, repeating fears, doubts, and insecurities that have no real basis in your present reality. To challenge negativity, you must first notice when it is present, and then make a deliberate choice not to accept it as truth. Negativity often presents itself as a voice of authority. It whispers that you are not enough, that your efforts will fail, or that the world is inherently against you. The danger lies in believing this voice is factual rather than interpretive. Challenging negativity requires a willingness to confront this voice directly, to question its assumptions, and to examine the evidence, or lack thereof, behind its claims. This process transforms the way you interact with your own mind. Every negative thought can be interrogated with a simple question: is this thought serving me or controlling me? This question shifts your perspective from passive consumption to active evaluation. It forces you to step back from the automatic flow of ideas and observe them critically. When you consistently apply this principle, you start to recognize patterns of thinking that undermine confidence, motivation, and progress. The more you question, the more you empower yourself to choose thoughts that are constructive rather than limiting. Negativity often thrives in silence and repetition. When left unchallenged, it gains momentum, growing stronger each time it is rehearsed in the mind. Challenging it requires vocalizing counter narratives, writing them down, or speaking them aloud. By asserting alternative, positive perspectives, you actively weaken the influence of destructive thinking. This is not about denial. It is about balancing your mental landscape with reality, possibility, and courage. Challenging negativity is also about embracing discomfort. Negative thoughts feel familiar, and it is often easier to surrender to them than to confront them. Yet growth lies on the other side of discomfort. Each time you challenge a negative belief, you stretch your mental capacity, strengthen resilience, and expand the range of what you consider possible. The process is gradual, but accumulates over time, creating a profound shift in how you experience life. Your environment plays a role in how negativity manifests and how easily it can be challenged. Surrounding yourself with people, media, and situations that reinforce doubt makes the battle more difficult, while seeking perspectives that encourage reflection, optimism, and possibility strengthens your ability to challenge destructive thinking. Awareness of your surroundings and their influence on your mind is an essential part of cultivating a mental space where positivity can flourish. Challenging negativity requires honesty and courage. It means admitting that some of your thoughts are unhelpful, unfair, or irrational, even when they feel justified. It requires a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about yourself, your fears, and your habits of mind. This honesty is liberating because it allows you to separate fact from interpretation, reality from assumption, and observation from judgment. By facing these thoughts head on, you strip them of power. Every challenge to negative thinking is an opportunity to replace it with something stronger and more constructive. When you identify a thought that is limiting, you can consciously redirect your energy towards solutions, creativity, and possibility. Over time, this practice rewires your mental habits, creating a mindset that is resilient, adaptive, and proactive. It is through this consistent effort that negative thinking loses its ability to dominate your mind. The act of challenging negativity also builds self-trust. Each time you confront a limiting thought and choose a more empowering one, you reinforce the belief that you are capable of influencing your own inner world. You develop confidence in your ability to navigate challenges, make decisions, and shape your experiences. This self-trust becomes the foundation for greater courage and bold action in every area of life. Finally, challenging negativity is an ongoing commitment, not a one-time achievement. The mind will continue to generate doubts and fears, but each challenge weakens the grip of those patterns. By consistently questioning, evaluating, and redirecting your thoughts, you build a mental environment where possibility outweighs limitation, courage outweighs fear, and hope outweighs despair. The practice becomes a lifelong skill that shapes not only your inner world, but the trajectory of your life itself. Taking ownership of your mind is the cornerstone of personal freedom and growth. For too long, many people allow external circumstances, other people's opinions, or automatic thought patterns to dictate the course of their lives. The mind is not a passive instrument. It is a dynamic, powerful force that responds to guidance, intention, and attention. When you take responsibility for it, you step into the role of architect rather than spectator, designing the inner environment that will determine the quality of your life. Ownership begins with awareness, but it goes further. It requires the recognition that your thoughts, beliefs, and mental habits are not fixed. They are yours to shape. You cannot always control what happens to you, but you can control how your mind interprets, reacts to, and processes every situation. This perspective transforms the way you experience challenges, setbacks, and opportunities, because the locus of control shifts from external forces to your own deliberate engagement with your inner world. Taking ownership of your mind demands discipline. The mind is prone to wandering, distraction, and unconscious repetition of old patterns. Without conscious effort, negative thinking, fear, and doubt can infiltrate your decisions and actions. By committing to deliberate thought, reflection, and mental exercises, you establish boundaries around your mind, guiding it toward constructive and empowering directions. Ownership is not passive, it requires active cultivation. It also requires courage to confront the truths about yourself that are uncomfortable or inconvenient. Many avoid examining their mental habits because it can reveal weaknesses, insecurities, or self-sabotaging tendencies. Ownership of your mind means being willing to face these realities honestly, without blame or excuse. It is the willingness to acknowledge that while external circumstances may influence you, the ultimate responsibility for your response rests squarely in your hands. Taking ownership allows you to reclaim power from negative thought patterns. When you recognize that your mind is generating thoughts that are unhelpful or destructive, you no longer need to be a victim of them. You can challenge, redirect, and transform those thoughts. Every moment becomes an opportunity to choose deliberately which ideas, beliefs, and perspectives you allow to guide your actions and shape your life. This is the essence of self-mastery. Ownership of the mind also empowers creativity and innovation. When you are fully in charge of your internal landscape, You are free to explore possibilities that fear or doubt might have previously blocked. You can experiment with new ways of thinking, problem solving, and approaching challenges. The mind becomes a laboratory, a playground where imagination and intentionality work together to create solutions and opportunities that were previously unimaginable. Taking ownership of your mind strengthens resilience. Life inevitably brings obstacles, failures, and disappointments, and the mind often reacts with despair or self-doubt. Ownership teaches you to respond with intentionality rather than reactivity. You learn to evaluate situations, interpret them through a lens of growth and learning, and take action based on clarity rather than emotion. In this way, challenges become catalysts for development rather than sources of defeat. It also fosters consistency in personal growth. By owning your mind, you commit to a lifelong process of reflection, learning, and adjustment. Every thought becomes an opportunity to refine your understanding, improve your choices, and strengthen your inner resolve. Consistency in this practice gradually reshapes your mental habits, creating a foundation for enduring confidence, focus, and determination. Taking ownership requires vigilance. The mind is constantly influenced by external inputs, media, social interactions, environmental stressors, and unconscious biases. Ownership does not mean isolation, but it does mean curating and filtering these inputs with discernment. You decide what to give attention to, what to internalize, and what to reject, ensuring that your mind is occupied with ideas, information, and perspectives that serve your goals rather than undermine them. Finally, taking ownership of your mind cultivates freedom. Freedom not as an abstract concept, but as an experiential reality where you are no longer a passive participant in your own life. You are actively shaping your thoughts, your emotions, and your responses. Every decision, every reaction, every interpretation is informed by conscious choice rather than unconscious habit. The power to shape your life begins with the power to govern your mind, and ownership is the gateway to that transformative capability. Action defeats fear because fear only has power when it is allowed to remain unchallenged. The moment you take deliberate steps, no matter how small, you disrupt the cycle of hesitation and doubt that fear thrives upon. Fear is often an illusion magnified by inaction, imagined consequences, and endless internal debate. Action transforms fear from a paralyzing force into a signal that you are moving in the direction of growth, and it reminds you that progress is always possible when you refuse to remain stagnant. Every time you act in the presence of fear, you rewire your mind to trust itself. Fear often convinces you that you are incapable, unprepared, or unworthy. Yet, each act of courage, each step forward despite uncertainty, proves otherwise. Action teaches the mind that you are capable of handling challenges, that setbacks are temporary, and that effort leads to learning and adaptation. Over time, repeated action diminishes the intensity of fear because experience replaces imagination and reality replaces assumption. Action also creates momentum. Fear feels enormous when it is imagined in isolation, but once you take steps, momentum builds. Small victories accumulate, creating confidence that propels you forward. Momentum transforms fear into energy, turning hesitation into motivation. Each successive act reinforces the belief that you can navigate uncertainty, survive discomfort, and achieve results that once seemed out of reach. This cumulative effect is far more powerful than any single act of courage. Fear often disguises itself as logic or prudence. It whispers that waiting, planning longer, or avoiding risk is the smarter choice. Action cuts through this disguise by demanding engagement rather than speculation. When you act, you learn information that cannot be discovered through thought alone. The world reveals its possibilities and limitations through experience, not worry. Action clarifies reality and reduces the imagined threats that fear inflates. The act of moving forward also strengthens resilience. Each step taken in spite of fear creates a mental record. You survived, you adapted, and you learned. This record becomes a source of strength during future moments of uncertainty. The mind begins to internalize the lesson that fear is a companion, not a jailer, and that growth is always achieved on the other side of discomfort. Action is the bridge that connects possibility to reality. Action turns intention into progress. Thoughts, plans, and aspirations remain powerless unless they are paired with deliberate effort. Fear thrives on indecision and inaction, convincing you that planning alone is sufficient. Yet life rewards movement, experimentation, and engagement. The simple act of starting, even imperfectly, initiates a chain reaction that transforms ideas into tangible outcomes. Each step forward is proof that fear is not the final authority over your choices. Acting in the face of fear also cultivates courage as a habit. Courage is not an innate trait reserved for a select few. It is a skill built through repeated practice. Each decision to act, even when uncertainty looms, strengthens the neural pathways associated with bravery. Over time, the mind learns to approach challenges with confidence rather than avoidance, and fear becomes a signal to take action rather than a reason to retreat. Action teaches perspective. When you engage with life actively, you gather information, confront obstacles, and gain clarity about what is possible. Fear thrives in the realm of the unknown, but action transforms the unknown into experience. With every attempt, you see that obstacles are rarely insurmountable, that mistakes are opportunities to learn, and that risk is a necessary companion on the path to achievement. Knowledge gained through action dissolves imagined threats. Action also creates accountability. By moving forward, you commit to your own growth and signal to yourself and others that you are serious about pursuing goals. Fear often isolates and paralyzes because it thrives in secrecy and speculation. Action breaks that isolation by creating tangible results and measurable progress. Each step taken reinforces your responsibility to yourself and your potential, replacing hesitation with purpose. Finally, action fosters belief in possibility. Fear whispers that your dreams are too large, your goals too distant, or your abilities too limited. Action proves these assumptions false. Each deliberate move, no matter how incremental, reshapes the narrative your mind tells itself. The act of doing becomes evidence that what you imagine can be achieved, that your potential is real, and that fear is merely a temporary state, conquerable by persistent engagement and relentless forward movement. Replacing negativity with courage and hope begins with the understanding that the mind is not a static force. It is malleable and responsive to attention and intention. The thoughts you choose to focus on, nurture, and act upon shape the emotional and mental atmosphere within which you live. When negativity dominates, it clouds perception, drains energy, and erodes confidence. By consciously cultivating courage and hope, you shift the internal environment, creating conditions for growth, resilience, and possibility. Negativity often masquerades as truth. It tells you that challenges are permanent, that setbacks define you, and that your abilities are limited. Courage, on the other hand, allows you to see fear for what it is, a temporary signal, not a verdict. Hope expands your vision, reminding you that outcomes are not predetermined, and that effort, perseverance, and creativity can influence results. By deliberately replacing pessimism with these forces, you reclaim your mind as a tool for empowerment rather than a source of limitation. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to act in spite of it. Negative thinking thrives when fear is given authority over your choices. By cultivating courage, you acknowledge fear but refuse to be paralyzed by it. You step into discomfort, uncertainty, and challenge with the conviction that growth is found on the other side of resistance. Each act of courage weakens negativity's grip and strengthens your belief in your own capabilities. Hope functions as the lens through which courage becomes sustainable. Courage alone can be fleeting if it is not guided by belief in possibility. Hope provides the context that allows brave actions to continue, even in the face of setbacks. It teaches the mind to anticipate opportunity, to see potential where others see limitation, and to maintain focus on long-term outcomes despite short-term difficulties. Replacing negativity with hope shifts your orientation from avoidance to pursuit. Replacing negativity with courage and hope requires vigilance. The mind is constantly bombarded with influences, external pressures, comparisons, past experiences, and internal biases that can reignite doubt. To maintain a mindset anchored in possibility, you must deliberately recognize negative patterns and replace them with constructive narratives. This is not a one-time effort. It is a consistent practice of self-reflection, affirmation, and conscious redirection of thought. This process is reinforced by action. Courage and hope are not abstract concepts. They are lived experiences that grow stronger through engagement. Each step taken toward a goal, each challenge met with resilience, and each obstacle reframed as a learning opportunity strengthens the mental pathways associated with optimism and bravery. Action provides evidence that your mind can be directed toward constructive thought, reinforcing the replacement of negativity with empowered thinking. Replacing negativity also involves reshaping your internal dialogue. The words you speak to yourself carry immense weight, influencing both your emotions and behaviors. Negative self-talk perpetuates limitation and doubt, while encouraging, hopeful, and courageous inner language fosters confidence, creativity, and persistence. By consciously choosing words that empower rather than diminish, you create a mental environment that supports growth and achievement. Cultivating courage and hope also changes how you perceive challenges. Situations that might once have triggered anxiety, despair, or resignation are reframed as opportunities to learn, innovate, and grow. Negativity sees barriers, courage sees a path, and hope envisions the destination. This shift in perception is transformative because it alters not only how you feel, but also how you respond. Responses rooted in possibility produce outcomes far beyond those dictated by fear or doubt. Community and influence play a role in reinforcing this mindset. Surrounding yourself with individuals who model courage, demonstrate resilience, and maintain hope strengthens your ability to replace negativity. Shared energy, perspectives, and encouragement create a supportive environment in which your mind is less likely to be overwhelmed by fear and pessimism. Influence is reciprocal. As you cultivate courage and hope within yourself, you also inspire it in others. Finally, replacing negativity with courage and hope is a lifelong commitment to self-mastery. It is the understanding that thoughts are not fixed, that your mind can be shaped by intention, and that you are responsible for the narratives you allow to dominate your inner world. By consistently choosing thoughts, actions, and beliefs rooted in possibility rather than limitation, you create a mental foundation that supports resilience, creativity, and fulfillment, transforming both your inner experience and the trajectory of your life.